Hey guys, tonight we sail into something a little quieter than blood-soaked raids and mead-soaked songs. Tonight we settle by the sea with a woman who waits longer than any ship was meant to drift. You're about to become her, your fingers ink-stained your breath, held your heart somewhere just past the horizon. You're sitting at the edge of your world. Candlelight flickering against the wall of your turf-roofed home, a small square of parchment curling at its edges in the cool salt air. Outside the ocean murmurs like a beast half asleep. Inside you dip your quill in soot-thickened ink. One breath in, one breath out. Then you begin to the waves who swallowed him. Your husband's ship vanished months ago. No wreckage, no bones, no final rites. Just absence like the breath before a scream. The elders said the gods must have wanted him, which is Viking. For you probably won't survive this, but here's a story to keep you company. He was meant to return before the river froze, before the ravens stopped calling, and the snow settled on your thatched roof in muffled heaps. But the fjord remained empty, the mead soured, and his boots remained by the door. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching from faraway shores, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to see where our sleepy Viking longboat drifts tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ink smells like burnt pine and blood Viking ink always does. You sign your name at the bottom of the page and roll the letter tight, binding it with twine. You'll toss it into the sea at dawn when the tide licks your ankles and the sky forgets how to be dark. You move slowly in the dim room, collecting driftwood for the hearth. Each creak of the floorboards echoes like a ship's hull. It's funny your house has never creaked like this before, but grief turns everything into ghosts. You think of him as grin like cracked amber, the way he used to whistle off key while sharpening his axe. The scent of salt and iron still clings to the wool of his cloak, now folded and untouched on the bench near your door. There's a legend in your village passed from one winter widow to the next. If you write a letter to the sea and the sea doesn't spit it back, it means the waves kept it. That's as close to an answer as you ever get around here. So you write. Not because it will bring him back, but because silence has teeth, and it's been gnawing at your ribs. Historians still argue whether Viking women like you were passive mourners or powerful agents in their own right. Truth is, both were true, depending on the day, the god, and the wind. But one thing's for certain, women who waited had their own wars to fight. Outside, the aurora stains the sky green and purple like bruises on heaven's skin. You step onto the snow barefoot, holding the letter to your chest. It's not cold, not yet. That comes later when dawn forgets to warm you. You pass the stone where you once crushed juniper berries into perfume, back when your world was smaller and his shadow lived in every room. You pause, breathe. Then you walk to the cliff's edge where the wind howls like a widow too long ignored. You tie the letter to a stone flat and river smoothed and toss it into the dark water. It vanishes without a splash. Like him. Funny thing, the Norse believed that the sea goddess Ran collected drowned sailors in a net of golden threads. But no one says what she does with their love letters. Maybe she wears them. Maybe she burns them. Maybe she just tosses them back when she's done weeping. You return home the night colder, now your footprints already fading behind you. You boil water for pine tea and settle onto the furs by the hearth. The fire crackles, small, stubborn, and alive. Like you. A little joke he used to make creeps into your mind. If I die merry, a man with a smaller axe makes me look bigger in hindsight. You laugh out loud. It hurts, but it helps. Somewhere, maybe he's reading your letter. Or maybe the tide just buried it in kelp and bone. Either way, you've sent something out and that's enough, for now. The candle gutters, the fire sighs. And you Viking widow begin to drift into sleep where boats never vanish and love always floats. You recall the last morning on the dock like it happened yesterday, though the wind has blown through more than 24 moons since. You stood there, wool cloak tugging at your shoulders, your hand pressed to the swell of your belly, though you carried no child. Just dread. He smiled, of course. They always smile before they vanish. His longboat had a painted serpent prow, all flared nostrils and carved teeth. It looked like it wanted to devour the sea. Or maybe it already had. The men laughed and shouted as they loaded barrels of salted herring and seal oil, their voices bouncing off the rocky fjord walls like gulls disturbed from their nests. He touched your wrist, not your hand, not your face, just the inside of your wrist, where your pulse ran wild. That was his favorite place. Said it was where your soul whispered. Then he said something stupid. Probably don't wait up. Probably with that half grin that made you want to throw him in the sea and dive in after. You watched his back as he climbed aboard the pelts across his shoulders, shifting with every step like living things. Then came the moment, the one you never speak of. That silence when the boat drifted just far enough from shore that you couldn't reach him, but not so far that you could pretend he was already gone. And you knew. Vikings were obsessed with omens. A raven flying east, a skipped heartbeat, a rock that split without cause. You had your own omen that morning. Your breath misted only once and then vanished completely, as if the gods had stolen it to keep. Historians still argue whether Viking seers, the Völvas, truly saw the future or were just incredibly good at reading people. But every woman in your village knew the truth. A Völva could glance at your threadbare smile and know if you'd ever see your man again. You weren't special. You were just someone who didn't get the ending carved in runestones. No saga, no heroic death, no shield maiden duel. Just a goodbye without the bye. Back then, the dock was cluttered with ropes, fish crates, and a dried cod that looked suspiciously like the blacksmith. Now it's just driftwood and seagulls and the echo of boots that never made it back. That was the day your neighbors started calling you the sea's pride. Not to your face, of course. But you heard it. You always hear it. It's the way they pause before greeting you, the way they only mention the weather when they pass. As if rain is more comforting than truth. That night, the ocean sang through your walls. Not a storm, just the kind of humming that slips between bone and skin. You pressed your ear to the floor and swore you heard his voice. Or maybe you just missed his snoring so much your brain invented acoustics. He had left before, of course. Once for a season of raiding the Irish coast. Another time just a short voyage to trade amber and linen for tin. But he always returned sunburned, laughing teeth, a little looser from bar fights with monks. You wrote him letters even then, but those were folded neatly and stored in a carved box by the hearth. These new letters, you tie them with kelp twine and toss them into the waves. Different ritual, different silence. It's odd what grief makes sacred. You still wear the iron needle he gave you, bent slightly from when you sat on it by accident. You still bake his favorite barley cakes, though you eat them alone and curse their smug roundness. And that morning, his last you found a white feather on your doorstep. Some say that's the sign of a soul departing. Others say birds are just jerks. Both are probably true. Your neighbor, old Marta, tried to comfort you with the tale of a husband who disappeared for 3 winters only to return with 2 scars, 1 eye, and a goat that bit anyone who touched him. You smiled politely and thanked her, but your heart muttered, "Mine's not coming back with a goat." You remember tracing the grooves of his wooden comb with your thumb that evening, memorizing the way it snagged slightly on the 4th tooth. You haven't used it since. You just hold it sometimes like it's a key to a door no one builds anymore. Some say writing helps. Others say it feeds the wound. You say both are right. That morning, the moment the serpent-headed ship rounded the fjord's edge and slipped from view, your story changed. Not ended, just became quieter. And the sea being what it is didn't apologize. It never does. It just swallowed the horizon and dared you to wait. The walls of your home are packed with straw and mud, warm enough to keep out most of the wind, but never all of it. You've lived here for years long before your husband set sail that final morning, and every creak in the beams feels like an old friend clearing its throat. Your bed is stuffed with goose feathers and moss. Your kitchen is a single iron pot suspended over the hearth. And yet somehow within these narrow walls you command an entire world. You wake before dawn most days just as your ancestors did. You stoke the fire with birch bark, wrap yourself in wool, spun from the sheep you helped shear, and set about the quiet work of surviving. Not thriving, not yet. Just surviving with a bit of spite and a pinch of salt. Viking homes weren't grand by any means. Just longhouses, wooden frames packed with turf, or logs shared with livestock in the colder months. You had to be careful where you stepped. One wrong move and you'd find your foot in a sleeping goat. But this was your empire. And like any good empress, you ruled it with iron spoons and fur-lined authority. Historians still argue whether the Viking household was a matriarchy or a tactical partnership. Some believe women ran the domestic world while men raged against the stormy seas. Others point to sagas where shield maidens carved their futures with blades sharper than their husbands' wits. You figure the truth is somewhere between most women simply did what needed doing with a side eye and a smile that could sour cream. In your home, every item tells a story. That wooden ladle carved by your brother before he left for Russ. The lopsided stool built by your husband in a fit of confidence and poor measurements. And the woven tapestry above your bed. A chronicle of your winters, each thread dyed with root ash, and the occasional accident involving spilled mead. Today, you take out the comb again as comb, and let your fingers drift along its edge while you boil water for porridge. The sheep are bleeding outside, scandalized by a raven sitting on the fence like it owns the place. You pause, glance at the black-feathered brat, and mutter, "You're late. Odin's probably furious." It blinks. You blink back. Standoff concluded you return to your pot. Some days you think of building a new room, just a small nook facing the sea. But that feels like inviting hope, and hope is dangerous. Hope is what makes you look down the fjord at sunset and pretend one of those boats might be his. You'd rather build walls. Still, you run your fingers along the grooves of the stone window frame he carved when your first goat escaped and chewed half the curtain. He'd laughed for hours, then etched a simple pattern into the sill with his knife, while you grumbled about teeth marks. Outside the village is already murmuring awake. Children chase chickens. A blacksmith shouts about stolen nails again. The same noises, the same smells. Smoked fish, hearth soot, a lingering note of goat. It all seeps through the gap in the turf walls like memory. You sometimes think about moving, but to where every village has its ghosts. At least here yours wears a familiar smile. The hearth hisses as you toss in a damp log. A spiral of smoke curls up like a question you can't answer. Your neighbor Gudrun knocks without waiting. She never waits and drops off a bundle of dried juniper. For your joints, she says, though what she really means is, I heard you crying again last night. You nod your thanks, make her tea, and sit across from her, while she rattles on about her son's new obsession with whittling spoons out of firewood. You half listen, letting the words wash over you like tidewater. It's a ritual. She talks, you nod, and grief sits politely between you both sipping steam. Then she asks it quietly as if unsure the air will allow it. Still nothing. You shake your head. Her hand finds yours. For a moment, neither of you are speaking, just breathing. Quirky detail for the day. The old sagas say if you sweep your home after sunset, you'll sweep away good fortune. You sweep anyway, every evening, on purpose, because some fortunes are better lost. When Gudrun leaves you, take the dried juniper and hang it by the door. Then you settle by the fire, pull your knees up beneath your skirt, and whisper, not a prayer exactly, just a message in case the sea has ears. You whisper what you'd never say aloud, I don't want to forget him. But I can't keep living in the shape he left behind. The fire cracks, the house creaks, and the sea somewhere out beyond the hills murmurs its salt-laced lullaby. You're hungry, but not for food. Still you eat. You chew yesterday's barley loaf and sip the broth you've thickened with bark flour and a spoonful of bear fat. That's gone slightly rancid, but not in a dangerous way, just a little judgmental. It smells like regret and pine needles, but it keeps you warm, and warmth is currency. The pot bubbles on the fire while you stir with one hand and scratch at a bramble scratch on your wrist with the other. Outside, the wind runs its fingers through the grass like a gossip trying to eavesdrop. You've lived with less. You've also lived with him, which was sometimes better, sometimes worse, and always warmer. You remember your first winter together. Snow piled high as your thigh. Your roof sagged like a tired ox. He tried to fix it with fishbone nails and optimism, and the whole thing collapsed during a blizzard. You both laughed so hard you forgot to be cold for a little while. You miss that kind of foolishness. Life now is mostly practical. Everything boiled. Everything smoked. Bread like stone, cheese like vengeance. Salt was gold. Honey was a myth, and if you wanted meat, you had to flirt with a knife and pretend you weren't afraid of the squealing. Still, you eat what he used to love, just in case his ghost still lingers in your kitchen. You pretend the broth tastes the same. It doesn't. Mainstream fact for your sleep-brined mind. Viking food was hearty, mostly made from barley, turnips, fish, and dried meats. They even brewed a weak sort of ale safe enough to drink strong enough to forget that the neighbors wouldn't stop arguing about pigs. Fermented fish sauce called garum in the south had a Norse cousin made from trout and regret. You keep a small jar in the back cupboard sealed like a secret. As you eat, you catch your reflection in the lid of the pot, just a smear of face and steam and metal. You look like your mother now. That's not a comfort. You rise, gather the bones from yesterday's supper, and walk out toward the edge of the cliff. The wind tastes of kelp and something metallic. You don't ask what. You bring the bones to the gods. It's not a proper ritual. You're not a priestess. But your mother told you once the gods don't need perfection. Just consistency. So you offer what you have, charred fish bones, 2 globs of fat, and a handful of dried dandelion root. You whisper names. Njord for the sea, Ron for the drowned Freya for your woman's aching heart. You pause before saying his name. Then you say it anyway. softly, into your own hand. Then you toss the offering into the wind, and it scatters like a secret too heavy to carry anymore. Historians still argue whether women performed these rites for the gods or merely maintained them out of custom. You know the truth when you've got nothing left. Even superstition feels like a conversation. Back inside the pot bubbles one last angry pop and goes still. You put the lid on the kind of lid that's slightly warped from years of heat and handling. Just like you. You sit down at the table, rough wood, nicked by years of knives and elbows. There's a burn mark from the time he spilled lamp oil while trying to impress you with a trick involving fire and chicken feathers. It went poorly. You still smile when you run your hand across that scorch mark. The memory isn't warm, but it's yours. Quirky tidbit. Some Viking households believed in little house spirits called Nisi, grumpy, invisible creatures who knocked things over when you forgot to leave them a scrap of porridge. You always leave a spoonful now, just in case. You don't need another reason for your broom to vanish. You light a bit of resin and moss in a cracked iron bowl. Not incense, just habit. The smoke curls like a question and disappears near the ceiling. You think of the sea again, of what it keeps, of what it forgets. You once told him that the ocean was a liar. It promised returns but gave only echoes. He said that's why we shout louder. You pick up a scrap of cloth, his old tunic, the one with the wine stain shaped like a bear. You sniff it like a fool. It smells like dust in the past. You fold it neatly and place it beneath your pillow. Outside, the moon rises silver and slow. The waves keep murmuring. You pull your blanket higher, but the cold isn't in the room, it's in your memory. Deep, persistent, polite. You whisper, "Sleep well, idiot," like you used to when he snored so loud it scared the cat. And then you sleep too. The sea speaks in your dreams. Not in words. Never in words, but in that slow, swaying rhythm that rocks your body like a cradle. You drift in and out of it, lulled by salt, sweet breath and the distant beat of oars that might not be real. When you wake, the sky is still that half blue of almost dawn, and your fingers are tangled in the blanket like you tried to hold on to something during the night. Maybe a hand. Maybe the memory of one. You don't get up right away. You lie there, eyes open, staring at the smoke-dark beams overhead, listening for birdsong. There's none. Just the wind licking at the cracks in your home like a thief looking for an easy way in. It's on mornings like this that you remember the stories. The ones they told around the fire. The ones you swore you'd never believe. There was one about a woman who dreamed of her husband every night for 7 years. And when he finally came back just a shade older, just a little quieter, he said he'd been dreaming of her too. The exact same dreams. Same words. Same weather. You used to laugh at that. You don't anymore. You rise slowly, the kind of slow that acknowledges your bones aren't as young as your will. You wrap yourself in a heavy wool shawl and shuffle to the door. You open it just wide enough to see that the sea is still there. Still moving. Still pretending it's innocent. You leave it open a crack. Just in case. You return to your stool and pick up the spindle. Your fingers find the rhythm without needing your eyes. Twist, pull, wind. It's a dance your grandmother taught you. A dance every Viking woman knows. Weave or starve. Spin or freeze. Create or the gods will forget you. Historians still argue whether Viking women spun only wool or flax as well. You've done both, and neither is kind. The flax cuts your fingers. The wool clings like a needy child. But it passes the time. And it reminds you that something still becomes something else even now. your mind wanders while you work, back to the first time he saw you spin. He stood in the doorway like he'd walked into a temple, arms crossed, eyebrows raised. If I were a thread, he said, I'd never want to leave your fingers. You threw a spool at his head. It hit him. He smiled. You married him 3 months later. Outside, a gull screeches like it's got something personal against the wind. You don't blame it. You keep spinning. You've got 3 tunics to finish by spring. Not for yourself, just barter. Some women make cakes. Some make bone needles. You make warmth. And while your fingers work, your heart doesn't know what to do with itself. It keeps checking the door. It keeps whispering, what if? That's the dangerous part, what if? It sneaks in like fog, stays longer than it should, wrecks everything it touches. Quirky little fact. For today's insomnia-ridden minds, some Viking women kept locks of their husband's beard hair in tiny bone beads around their necks. You did that once. Yours fell into the fire during Yule. You pretended not to see it burn. You pause your spinning and reach into the carved box beside the hearth. Inside, wrapped in wool, is his cup. A simple thing carved from birch rim, chipped from years of knocking it against shield rims and table edges. You press it to your lips, not to drink, just to remember the shape of his hands. You whisper again, I miss you. Just that. Just those 3 words. The rest are folded too tightly to speak. You look toward the shoreline. The tide is low now. The rocks are slick with green, and the sea foam curls like lace. You've walked that shore so many times your feet know the pattern of each stone. You've dropped letters there. You've buried memories. You've shouted at gods. None of them answered. But the act matters more than the result. It always has. That's what you've come to believe. You do not speak because someone hears. You speak because silence would eat you alive if you didn't. So you write again. You pull out a strip of birch bark, scrape it smooth, and pick up the charcoal stub you save for only these letters. Your script is small but neat. You don't bother with greetings anymore. You start mid-thought. You probably wouldn't like the stew I made last night. Too many turnips. Not enough charm. The dog liked it, though. She misses you too, though she's pretending not to. Like someone else I know. You write until the charcoal smears, until the ash from the hearth dances on the page like snowflakes. Then you roll it carefully and set it beside your shawl. You'll deliver it at dusk. For now, you keep spinning. 1 thread, 1 thought. 1 heartbeat at a time. You wake again before sunset, curled on your side like a comma in a half-finished sentence. The light slants through the cracks in the walls, long and honeyed, and the sea hums in the background like a memory trying to be a song. Your mouth tastes of ash and sleep. Your fingers are still clutching his old wool shawl like a child clings to a story they don't want to end. You rise slowly, bones whispering curses in Old Norse. The letter waits by the door, its birch bark curling slightly at the edges like it knows what fate awaits it. You touch it briefly, just 2 fingers like a blessing, or a goodbye. Outside, the tide is coming in. You wrap yourself tightly, shawl over shoulders, and pick up your walking stick, a gnarled thing carved from driftwood and half-believed promises. The sea path is narrow and slick with moss winding between boulders where seabirds scream insults into the wind. You tread carefully. The rocks remember your steps. You've walked this way too many times not to leave a mark, even if it's only in your own mind. The sky is pinking now, streaked with bruised orange and quiet blue. The air smells of salt, wet kelp, and whatever secret thing the sea hides when you're not watching. As you near the edge of the cliff, your boots slip just slightly the way they always do near that one patch of lichen. Your heart stumbles, but your feet recover. A tiny moment, but it reminds you how easily the world can tilt. There's a flat stone you use, always the same one. It's smooth and wide enough to sit on, and it faces the horizon like a throne for someone too tired to rule. You settle there, fingers shaking just a little from cold or memory, it's hard to say. You unroll the letter and whisper its contents aloud as if the sea prefers sound to script. Your voice is rough at first, then softer. There's laughter in it too, just a trace. Like the echo of someone you used to be. You pause at the last line. If you're still out there, I hope you've forgotten how to be lonely. You fold the letter, tie it with a strand of seagrass, weigh it down with a pebble, and toss it. The splash is quiet. Too quiet for such a loud ache. Mainstream historical fact. Vikings believed the sea was alive, not just full of gods, but conscious. Thinking. Watching. Ran, the sea goddess, was said to drag drowning men into her net woven of gold. Njord, her estranged husband, calmed the waves for those he favored. You're not sure which one has your husband. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe he's become part of the sea itself, stitched into the tide bone by wave-smooth bone. You sit for a long while after staring at the ripples where your words vanished. The wind pulls at your braid. Your cheeks are stiff with cold. A fringe belief. Some Viking wives swore that if they whispered a name into the tide for 9 days in a row, the sea would speak back on the 10th. You're on day 12. No reply. Typical. You reach into your satchel and pull out a flat bit of antler carved with his initials. It used to hang around your neck, but the cord snapped last winter and you never fixed it. You rub it now between your palms, willing some warmth into it. Into yourself. There's a gull perched on a nearby stone, eyeing you like it knows secrets. You tilt your head and speak aloud. Don't suppose you're here to bring me a sign? It blinks, poops, flaps away. That tracks. You laugh, a sharp thing at first, but it softens on its way out. Not all grief is weeping. Sometimes it's just finding gull poop hilarious because you desperately needed to laugh. Back home, you light a beeswax stub and sit by the fire shawl still damp at the edges. You set out a bowl of milk for the Nisse just in case. Not because you believe, but because you've got enough enemies without adding invisible kitchen spirits to the list. You pull out the comb again. You run it through your hair, tugging gently at the tangles. You can almost hear his voice teasing soft, saying something about how you always scowl when it snags. You scowl on purpose now, just for him. Your fingers pause on a knot of hair. You untangle it slowly, carefully, like you're trying to keep from waking something sleeping beneath your skin. And then you whisper his name. Just once. Just to remind the room who used to fill it. A shadow passes over the window. Not a person, not a gull. Just the kind of darkness that makes you want to light a second candle even if the first one is still strong. You do. And you wait. Not for him. Not anymore. Just for the sea to breathe. Tonight you dream in fragments. Not full stories, just flashes the curve of his back as he lifted a barrel. The gold fleck in his left eye when he laughed the way his hand once lingered too long on your spine during a storm, when the wind threatened to take the roof again. You wake just before dawn, heart slow and heavy like a drum buried in snow. There's no reason to rise, and yet you do. That's the ritual now. You greet the day not because it deserves you, but because you refuse to vanish like he did. You stoke the fire with numb fingers and mutter to the embers. You better be grateful. The porridge is bland and overcooked but warm. You eat in silence, watching the steam curl into the air like forgotten prayers. Sometimes you think the house is shrinking. Or maybe grief just makes everything feel tighter. He took up so much space physically, emotionally, musically, terrible singing. Now the quiet buzzes in your ears like bees with nowhere to go. You step outside, wool wrapped tight, and glance toward the sea. Always the sea. It plays dumb, glittering like it's innocent, like it hasn't eaten your entire life in one wave. Today you need something to do. Not spinning, not writing, something harder. So you walk to the edge of the village and fetch your old axe from the shed, the one with the crack in the haft and the stubborn head that never stays snug. Like your marriage, you always did most of the work, but the weight of it, that was shared. There's a tree nearby that's been leaning too long. You size it up, mutter. Let's both fall together and swing. Vikings respected trees. Sacred groves, ash trees, symbolizing Yggdrasil, the world tree. But they also chopped the hell out of them. Balance, as always, was key. You work in silence. The thunk of metal into wood is satisfying in a way most things aren't anymore. The splinters fly, your muscles ache, your breath fogs. The axe slips once and kisses your thumb, drawing a thin red line that tastes like iron when you suck it clean. You pause, sit on a stump, and press your palm to your chest like you're trying to keep yourself from leaking. Historians still argue whether Viking women regularly took on labor like this or only in desperate times. You smirk. Times have been desperate for a while now. A squirrel watches you from a branch overhead, tail twitching with judgment. You throw a chunk of bark at it. Miss. It chitters something profoundly rude and flees. You laugh, out loud, the kind that sounds like it's escaping not being invited. Back home, you lay the firewood out to dry one piece at a time like bones on a pyre. Then you sit exhausted and soot-streaked your hands, shaking from more than effort. There's a strange calm in your belly. Not peace exactly, but something shaped like it. You light the fire again and lean back on your heels. The warmth bites at your cheeks. You watch it flicker and think if he were here, he'd have ruined this quiet moment with a terrible joke about kindling our love, or some nonsense involving wood. You'd have groaned, rolled your eyes, smiled anyway. You write no letter today. Not because you've run out of things to say, but because some days are just meant for remembering not speaking. You take out your small sack of charms and trinkets, each one tied to a moment. Each one holding a memory like a breath in the dark. There's the broken bead from your wedding necklace. The smooth stone from your first walk by the fjord when he dared you to throw it at a swan. You didn't, but he did, and the swan won. And the scrap of cloth from his old tunic, the one he wore when he carved your names into the inside of your pantry door. You touch each one slowly, carefully, like words in a language only your hands still understand. Quirky tidbit of the day. In some Norse villages, people believed that if you carried 3 items tied with red thread, they could ward off sea curses and betrayal. You tried it once. He betrayed nothing but time. You wrap them all back up and return the pouch to its place beneath the floorboard, your secret shrine. The sun begins to sink again. Days are short now. The dusk arrives before you're ready, like grief dressed as twilight. You step out one more time to watch the light fade on the water. And for just a breath, one perfect aching breath, you imagine his longship on the horizon. You don't see it, but your body reacts as if it might. You lean forward, you blink, but the sea stays blank. Still, you say it out loud just in case. Come home or send a better dream. Then you turn away. Night wraps around your house like a second pelt. Outside, the wind worries at the shutters, and the fire dances low its glow, licking the walls with soft orange breath. You sit by the hearth, a blanket around your shoulders, and your knees tucked up like secrets you haven't told yet. Tonight, you need a voice other than your own, even if it's borrowed. So you reach for the leather-wrapped bundle near your bed, a roll of memories held together with twine and habit. Inside are scraps of tales, half-remembered poems, sagas spoken to you by your mother, and stories told too often by people too drunk to tell them well. You select one, the Saga of Brekka and the Sea. It's not a famous one. It never made it to the Skalds. Just something passed around by firelight like stew or scandal. You smooth the page worn and smudged from years of hands and tears and begin reading aloud softly. Brekka was a wife like many quiet when ignored thunder when wronged. Her husband Chalfi sailed away with promises of silver and storm chasing. He left her with 1 kiss, 2 goats, and 3 debts. You smirk. Brekka sounds familiar. Years passed, and each Yule she told the gods she'd trade her finest linen for 1 whisper of his fate. The gods said nothing, but one night she heard a song in the waves. Not words, just rhythm. And in it she knew. He was bones, but he was hers. You close the bundle gently and set it aside. Historians still argue whether oral storytelling was entertainment or education. You know the truth, it was survival. Without stories, there's nothing but weather. Your mind drifts. You remember the last story he ever told you something absurd about a fisherman who fell in love with a selkie and tried to knit her a sweater from seaweed? It didn't end well. He told it with such conviction that you snorted tea out your nose. You miss laughing so hard it hurts. You miss him making up stories just to see your eyes roll. You lean back, resting your head against the wall, and close your eyes. The room creaks. The wind chatters in the chimney. A log shifts in the hearth and pops. And then you hear a voice. Faint, almost a whisper. You open your eyes. No one there, of course not, but still you wait. You want it to be him. Not the gods. Not a ghost. Just him. Saying your name like it's a thing that deserves to be remembered. Instead, you speak his. Just once. It slips out of your mouth like a breath you didn't mean to give away. The fire flares slightly. You blink. Quirky belief time, some Vikings used to carve symbols into their hearthstones, believing spirits could climb out if the proper rune was scratched deep enough. You trace a line on the stone now. Just for comfort. You don't believe in ghosts, but grief is a kind of haunting, isn't it? You rise, light a second candle, and go to your small window. Outside, the sea is lit only by stars and the distant shimmer of the moon's reflection. It looks peaceful, but you know better. Still, you whisper, "Bring him home." Or don't. Just tell me which it is. No answer. But the wind shifts. Back inside, you climb beneath the furs, wrapping yourself in warmth, tucking your fingers into the edge where the wool still smells like him. And as your eyes begin to close, you picture Brekka fictional or not sitting by her own fire, whispering to the waves. You wonder how many women have done the same. How many names have been spoken into tide and foam? How many stories were never written down, just left to curl in the salt air and vanish? Maybe that's what the sea is made of, not just water, not just gods, but all the letters never answered. You slip towards sleep with one final thought: if stories can keep the dead alive, maybe your voice is the only boat he needs to find his way back. And if not, then you'll keep whispering anyway. At dawn, the world is cold and honest. You sit on the edge of your bed, rubbing your hands together for warmth. Outside, the sea groans against the rocks like an old warrior rolling over in sleep. You wrap your shawl tighter and rise, stepping barefoot across the dirt floor. It feels like penance, something to earn the day ahead. There's a task waiting. Today is offering day. You gather the usual length of dried fish skin, a pouch of smoked barley, the smallest shard of silver from your broken brooch, and a bone button he once carved into the shape of a tiny serpent. The things you offer aren't valuable to anyone but you. That's what makes them worthy. You wrap the bundle in woven linen, tie it with care, and tuck it into the crook of your elbow. The walk to the shoreline is longer this morning. Not because the path has changed, but because your heart drags behind you like a second shadow. The wind is sharp, and your breath leaves your lips in puffs as if even it wants to escape. You pass Gudrun on the way. She's scattering feed for her chickens, her face scrunched against the wind. She doesn't ask where you're going, she knows. Everyone knows. Give them hell, she mutters. You smile faintly. That's the plan. The trail to the sea shrine winds down through frost-hardened grass and past an old stone marker carved with runes, so faded they're more memory than language now. You touch it briefly like always. Just enough to feel like you've been acknowledged. Mainstream fact, Vikings often gave offerings to deities like Njord the sea god and Ran the goddess who netted drowned souls. Their shrines weren't temples, not in the grand Roman sense, but stones and carved staves tucked along shores and fjords. Places of conversation more than worship. You reach your own altar, a weather-smooth stone half submerged in the tide. It's not grand, but it listens. You kneel beside it, placing your bundle down gently. The linen darkens as seawater licks its edge. You speak aloud, not a prayer, not a plea. Just a message. Take these. Keep them. Or send something back. You don't expect a reply. You don't even want one, not really. Answers are heavy things and your shoulders are already tired. A wave creeps forward, swallowing the offering, then pulls away without a trace. The linen is gone. Just like him. You sit for a while longer, arms wrapped around your knees, watching the horizon where the sea ends and the sky forgets to begin. The water glimmers. It's beautiful. It's cruel. You remember how he once said the sea was the only thing bigger than his stubbornness. You'd argue that goats were a close second. He'd laughed so hard he almost dropped the oar. You laugh now, softly, and the sound surprises you. Quirky detail. Some Viking sailors tied bits of iron to their boats to ward off sea spirits, believing it could blind them. Your husband didn't. He said if the sea wanted him, it could have him, but it better have manners. You wonder if that worked. You rise slowly, knees stiff, and begin your walk back home. The wind at your back feels like a hand you don't trust. You don't look over your shoulder. Back in the village, people pretend not to see you. That's their version of kindness. Some give nods. One young boy with shaggy hair and mismatched mittens hands you a shell. It's lucky, he says. You tuck it into your pocket. We'll see. Inside your home, you peel off the wet shawl and hang it near the hearth. The fire greets you like an old friend, grumpy but dependable. You sit beside it, holding the shell in your palm. It's smooth and pale with a pink swirl that reminds you of the stories about sea spirits who live in a curl of sound. You press it to your ear. You hear nothing, of course. Not even the sea. But still you keep it there. You write again that afternoon. Another letter short this time. Today I gave you another button. If you find it, I hope it reminds you that you were always the better carver. But I was the better keeper. You don't burn this one. You don't tie it to a rock. You tuck it inside the shell and place it near the window just in case the wind decides to read. You drink a little mead before bed. Not much. just enough to remember what it felt like to be warm on purpose. Then you lie back beneath the furs and close your eyes. The fire hums, the wind breathes, and the sea, though distant, feels just close enough to whisper. Tonight, the tide keeps its secrets. You dream of footprints in wet sand, yours maybe, or someone else's. They lead nowhere, or rather they loop back around again and again until you're dizzy with following yourself. When you wake, it's with the taste of salt on your lips and a sharp ache behind your eyes, like sleep has been scraping barnacles off your soul. You light the fire before the sun even peeks over the fjord. It's a restless morning. You want to move to do anything but sit with the waiting. You fetch water from the well, splashing your face with a handful so cold it knocks your breath clean out of your chest. The bucket handle bites into your fingers as you haul it back. You imagine his voice behind you. Careful, strong one. You'll flood the village with your ambition. You almost answer aloud. But the morning feels fragile, like a bowl balanced on one fingertip, and you're afraid your words might shatter it. Today, you visit the shoreline again, not with an offering, but with a question. You don't say it out loud. You just sit on your usual stone and look out across the horizon, trying to imagine what the sea looks like from the other side. The waves roll in, roll out, roll in again. Relentless, dispassionate, perfect, and that's when you see it. A comb, drifting along the rocks, tangled in kelp. Its teeth broken in places, its wood darkened by time and tide. You hesitate to reach for it because your mind has already written 1,000 reasons why it can't be his. It's too old, too clean, too convenient. But you reach anyway. You pluck it from the tide pool and turn it over in your hand. Same shape. Same kind of wood. Same uneven tooth near the end. The one you always teased him about. It can't be his. Of course not. Or maybe it is. You don't decide. You let it live in the space between belief and doubt, the same place you've been living honestly. Mainstream historical fact combs were incredibly common in Viking culture. Nearly every grave unearthed includes one ornate practical symbolic. Cleanliness wasn't just a luxury, it was status, ritual, identity. To carry a comb was to carry dignity. You hold his comb like it might hum, like it might know the way home. Back in your cottage, you place it on the mantel above the hearth. It sits between the candle stubs and the old clay cup he once drank from after a snowball fight, ended with both of you soaked and laughing. You try to ignore the way your hands shake as you light the evening fire. That night you write again, but this time not on bark or cloth. You carve. You take a thin strip of driftwood from your stores and scratch your message into it with the tip of a sewing needle. I found something today. I think you dropped it, or maybe you left it for me. Either way, I'm still here. You tie it with kelp string, but don't take it to the water. Not yet. You leave it by the door like you're expecting him to walk in and pick it up himself. Quirky detail. Some Norse villages believed that found objects returned by the sea were messages from the drowned tokens sent to reassure or to haunt. You decide which this is later. Maybe tomorrow, maybe never. That evening, as you stir a pot of nettle soup, you feel the house shift. Not literally. Not in the way beams creak or doors swell from damp, but in the way a place changes when something once lost has returned. It feels fuller. Not with presence exactly, but with possibility. You dip a spoon into the broth and taste it. Too bitter. He would have teased you, called it revenge soup. You chuckle softly and add a little honey from the jar you've been hoarding for winter's worst. That night, you dream again. This time, there are no footprints, just still water. Calm, reflective, and somewhere in the distance, the echo of laughter, his or yours, you can't tell. When you wake, you place the comb gently in your pocket, just in case it ever tries to leave again. The village market arrives with noise. Carts squeal, chickens complain, and voices overlap in a kind of melodic chaos that only happens when humans gather to trade salted fish, gossip, and cabbage. No one truly wants, but everyone buys anyway. The air smells like sweat, firewood, and old apples, a blend you've come to find oddly comforting. You don your thickest shawl, the one stitched with blue thread along the hem, and set off with your basket of goods. Inside are your contributions, whale oil in clay pots, sealed with beeswax. 2 bundles of embroidered linen stitched with the knotwork patterns your mother taught you, and a pouch of dried mushrooms you don't trust, but someone always seems to want. You haven't spoken much in days, so your voice sounds strange when you finally greet the first stall-keeper, a barrel-chested man with frost-bitten ears and a permanent scowl. He trades you barley and onions for your whale oil, grunting approval like he's doing you a favor. There's something grounding about the rhythm of the market. It reminds you that life continues even if you feel paused inside. Children dart between legs, one tripping and face-planting into a basket of pickled turnips. His mother scolds him without turning around. An old woman offers you a wooden spoon shaped like a serpent, claiming it was carved from driftwood washed up after a storm. You don't need another spoon, but you trade for it anyway. Because it's a market day, and on market days you pretend things are normal. Mainstream historical fact, Viking women were central to trade. Not just behind stalls, but running them. Many owned their own goods, bargained fiercely, and even traveled. Female traders, kopmatters, were not rare, especially in coastal communities where men vanished often and women learned fast. You pass a small booth covered in furs manned by a young boy barely old enough to shave. He's trading on behalf of his mother, who you heard was sick. You buy a strip of otter pelt not because you need it, but because someone needs to keep the boy busy. And then, just as you're weighing a bundle of smoked fish, someone speaks your name. Not the whisper of your neighbors. Not the polite tone of a seller. No, this is different. Warmer? Closer? Too familiar. You freeze. It's just Marta, of course. Your neighbor. She touches your elbow gently and leans in. I heard a trader came in from the east. Said he met a man on a ship who had the same scar as your husband. You turn slowly. What kind of scar across the left eye? Long? Ugly? She smiles faintly. Sound familiar? You nod because it does, but so do a dozen other stories that turned into salt and silence. Still, your heart reacts before your reason can stop it. Where did the trader go north, I think? Maybe to the next village. Gone already. Of course, you finish your trading with half a mind. The barley feels heavier, the onions sharper, and every man you pass looks just slightly too much like him if you squint hard enough. By the time you return home, your basket full, your body is tired, but your thoughts are racing. You unpack slowly, mechanically. Your hands know the routine even as your heart spins. You sit by the fire and stare at the spoon you traded for. The serpent's head is carved in such a way that it looks like it's mid-laugh. You tap it against your knee. Quirky belief. Some Viking women would whisper into their combs or jewelry before trade days asking for luck or knowledge. You used to laugh at that. But this morning you whispered into the comb you found on the shore. Maybe that's why you heard the rumor. Or maybe Marta's just getting bored. You set a pot of broth on to boil and slice a few onions into it. The scent stings your eyes, but not enough to blame the onions for everything. You don't write a letter tonight. Instead, you sit beside the fire and say it aloud. If you're alive, you better come back with something better than a scar. You wait. The house doesn't creak. The wind doesn't howl. But for a moment, the fire flickers in a way that reminds you of how he used to breathe when he was trying not to laugh. You let yourself believe it means something, just for tonight. Yule comes cold and uninvited. The sun barely rises now, just peeks over the mountains, yawns, and slinks back down. You light candles earlier each day. By noon, the shadows own the house. You let them. They understand you. You prepare as tradition demands a feast small but deliberate. A cured fish. A barley cake. Mead thinned with water and hope. A round of soft cheese marked with his name. You always carve it in. His name scratched lightly with the tip of your knife into the white rind. No one eats that piece. You set it aside like a charm, a marker, an empty place at the table that no one dares acknowledge too directly. There's no rule that says widows must do this. But you're not a widow, are you? Not officially. Not in any way that counts on paper or stone. You're something else. Something vaguer. A space someone used to fill. You set the table anyway. The Yule goat hangs above the door, woven from straw and tied with red string. Its beady eyes judge you less than usual this year. Maybe it understands grief too. Maybe it's just tired of hanging around. Neighbors come and go that afternoon. Small gifts exchange laughter, forced in places where silence almost won. Gudrun brings honey cakes. Marta offers a comb made of bone, clearly meant to replace the one you won't stop looking at. You accept it. Smile. Tuck it away. You know which comb matters. Mainstream fact for your Yule dreams. Viking Yule was a sacred time stretching over 12 nights full of firelight, sacrifice, feasting, and storytelling. It honored the old gods and the turning of the year. It was a time for remembering the dead and for demanding that the living stay warm, drunk and a little louder than their sadness. So you try. You pour 2 cups of mead. Yours goes cold. His remains untouched. You eat quietly, watching the candlelight flicker against the hearthstones, the carved figures above it, Thor with his hammer, Freya with her necklace, and a third you once swore, look like him stare down in mute sympathy. Later, you sit by the fire with a bit of wool, trying to remember how to laugh. You fail, but your lips do curve slightly at the memory of last Yule hymn, drunkenly attempting to recite a saga and confusing Odin with a fishmonger. He insisted Odin sold eels. You insisted he sleep outside. He didn't, of course. But the goats did. Tonight you miss even the goats. The cheese with his name on it sits untouched. You place it on the windowsill as an offering to the gods, the ghosts, or the gulls. Whoever gets there first. Quirky tidbit for dreamers like you. Some believe that if the Yule fire burned steady without popping, it meant the dead were nearby watching, warming their hands. Your fire tonight crackles wildly. You pretend it means he's laughing somewhere. You light a new candle and begin sewing. Just small stitches along the hem of a linen square. A handkerchief, maybe. Or a future something. You're not even sure. It's the movement that matters. As the fire dies lower, you find yourself talking out loud. They said you might have gone east, that someone saw your scar. I don't believe it. Or I do. Depends on the hour. You look at the cheese again. Still untouched. Still his. I made that one with garlic. Your favorite. Or maybe you lied to make me feel better. You did that. Too often. The candle guttered once, then settled. You lean back, eyes slipping shut. There's a small creak at the door. You don't move, you don't breathe, but nothing follows it. Of course not. Still, you whisper, "Happy Yule, idiot," and then softer, "Come home." Then the wind sighs down the chimney, and you let yourself believe just this once that maybe it's him answering. You wake to a strange quiet. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind. The kind that presses on your ribs and makes the birds forget to sing. Yule morning. Your back aches from sleeping by the hearth again, curled like a question mark in front of the dying coals. You stretch slowly and find your hand still holding the hem of the half-sewn linen. A thread dangles loose like a sentence left unfinished. You finish it later. Or never. That's fine. You rise, brush ash from your skirt, and step outside into the pale dawn. The snow has fallen light and powdery in the night, softening every corner of the world. Footprints vanish as soon as they're made. You glance down the shoreline out of habit, but today the tide is low and the beach is empty. Still, you wait a moment. No sails. No returning shadow on the horizon. But that's not new. You return indoors to tend the fire, coaxing it back to life with birch bark and breath. It flares like it resents being needed. You mutter same under your breath and laugh once, sharp and involuntary. Today you allow yourself the luxury of memory. You sit on the fur-covered stool and open the small chest at the foot of your bed. Inside, keepsakes, little things he gave you across seasons, some deliberate, some just abandoned that you quietly claimed. A stone from his first voyage polished and flat. A torn scrap from the cloak he wrapped around your shoulders during the storm of the green summer. A seal tooth he swore was lucky despite having lost it on a bet. And one other thing, a tiny linen pouch no bigger than your palm. Inside it, 3 barley seeds, a smooth pebble, and a splinter from the longship he helped build before his last departure. You don't know why you kept it. Maybe it's not about reason. Mainstream historical fact. Viking marriages were as complex as any others. Some were political, arranged for land and alliances. Others were forged through affection, shared hardship, and the kind of companionship that doesn't make the sagas but shapes the spaces between them. Lullabies, inside jokes, secret places to hide from storms. You remember your wedding night, not the ceremony, which was loud and slightly drunken, but the moment after. You were sitting beside the fire half asleep, and he whispered, "If I die, you don't have to mourn. Just keep insulting me in your thoughts so I stay humble in Valhalla." You've kept your part of the deal. You say the worst things in your head. About how he snored like a dying bear, how he couldn't cook anything without charring it into a weapon, how he always forgot where he put your spindle and blamed it on spirits. You keep him alive that way. Snark memory and barley soup. You head to the village to exchange Yule tokens. It's the custom, small gifts traded even if you can't afford generosity. You bring wool mittens you knitted with red and blue stitches. The colors he once said made you look dangerously warm. People greet you more gently than usual. Eyes softer. Words quieter. Marta gives you a new kettle. I thought yours might be tired. She says not quite looking at you. You accept it with a nod and offer her a pair of mittens in return. She pulls them on and flexes her fingers like she's testing armor. Back home, you boil water in the new kettle. It hisses contentedly. You write again just a few lines on a strip of bark you shave thin with the edge of your knife. Still making mittens. Still telling you off in my mind. Still here. Happy Yule. B. You press your thumb to the bottom like a seal, then tie the letter to the cheese you left on the windowsill the night before. You carry it to the edge of the beach, the snow crunching underfoot. You offer the bundle to the sea. It accepts it without fanfare. The waves tug it away like a parent taking a note from a child and saying nothing, but maybe smiling. You sit on the stone afterward, staring at the water. A thought creeps in. One you haven't let land before. What if he did survive? What if he stayed away on purpose? The idea stings, but it's not impossible. Men vanish for many reasons. Storms, swords, cowardice. You breathe slowly. Let the pain rise, then let it go. Because even if he didn't come back for you, he still left something behind. A version of you who waits, who writes, who knows her worth even in silence. Quirky tidbit of the day. Some Viking widows became priestesses. Others remarried. Some took over farms and ran them better than any man had. One supposedly started her own shipbuilding guild. Another, the stories say, married a fisherman and then built a shrine to her first husband anyway. You like that one. Back inside, you tuck the chest of keepsakes beneath the bed again. You don't need to open it tomorrow. But you might. You always might. You sit beside the fire with your new kettle steaming. The mittens you kept for yourself warm your hands. And outside the snow falls again, erasing footprints, yes, but also making room for new ones. You whisper to no one in particular, I'll be here again next Yule. Just so you know. Then you smile. Just slightly. The new year creeps in like fog across the fjord. Quiet, unhurried, a soft thing that leaves your windows frosted and your bones reluctant to move. You count the mornings since the last letter. 27 or 28. It's hard to say. Winter doesn't care for numbers. Time here isn't measured by clocks or bells, but by how often you have to patch your mittens or knock ice off the roof with a broom handle. This morning you wake with a strange feeling in your chest. Not pain, not joy. Something in between, like a hand pressed gently against your sternum, reminding you, still here, still breathing, still waiting. You wrap yourself in your thickest cloak, the one lined with rabbit fur from the spring. You spent too much time alone in the forest. You walk down the frozen path with no clear plan, just a feeling that the house is too small today for the shape of your heart. The sea is frozen at the edges now, crusted over with delicate sheets that fracture with every shifting breeze. You crouch beside the shoreline fingertips, brushing against the rim of ice, listening to the groaning beneath it, like something ancient sleeping and turning over in its bed. You take out another letter. This one is different. It's not written to him. It's written about him. They asked me why I still write. I said, because silence is clever. It sneaks in when you stop speaking. It wears your clothes, eats your food, and tells you you're better off forgetting. So I write because I remember. And because forgetting is too easy for people who never waited on a shore. You stare at the letter a long time. And then perhaps for the first time you don't send it. You keep it. Fold it neatly. Tuck it into the small pocket of your cloak. Some things, it turns out, are meant to stay. Mainstream historical fact: while Viking men are often remembered for voyages and violence, women were the memory keepers, passing down lore names, customs. The spoken word was their archive. The home, their realm of record. Without them, the sagas would have crumbled into sea foam. You return to the village that afternoon, drawn by the scent of smoke and fresh bread from the communal ovens. A few neighbors gather there, older women mostly, and a handful of children bundled in wool like walking potatoes. Someone has made honey cakes. Someone else is mending nets in anticipation of spring fishing. The conversation is gentle, slow as melting ice. You sit with them for a while. No one presses you to speak. That's the kindest part. One girl offers you a stone with a hole through it. It's lucky she says proud of the discovery. If you look through it, you see the truth. You peer through it just for her. The hole is jagged and small, and all you see is the snow-covered boot of your neighbor. Well, you murmur he needs new boots. She giggles and skips away. Later, as the sun slips behind the ridge, you walk home with the stone clutched in your hand. You place it on the table beside your fire. It stares at you like an eye. You stare back. You don't write that night, you just think. Think of the way he used to whistle off-key while he repaired the netting. Think of how he folded his tunics badly and you'd find sleeves tucked inside out, and how he called it strategic disorder. Think of the moment he left. It comes in flashes now, less sharp, less cruel, more distant. Maybe that's what healing is. Not forgetting, just distance. Just the ability to stand a little farther from the wound and see that it hasn't swallowed you whole. Quirky belief. Some believe the sea held memories, that the waves lapped up the past and returned it, only to those patient enough to wait by the shore. Maybe that's true. Or maybe it's just something people say when they don't want to admit they're lonely. You go to bed early that night, the fire low, the shadows long. You slip the unsent letter beneath your pillow, and as your eyes close you whisper, "Tomorrow I'll talk about something else." But you don't mean it. Not yet. You spend the morning mending, not because anything is particularly torn, but because stitching makes the silence feel structured. Your fingers move through cloth like they remember more than your heart wants to. You patch a sleeve that doesn't belong to anyone anymore, then a sock with a hole so large it may as well be a scarf. It doesn't matter, these small repairs are not about need. They are rituals. Quiet declarations I am still here, I still care for things. The snow outside has softened. Thick drifts hug the house and icicles drip with slow patience. You catch one in a clay cup and set it by the fire to melt. You don't know why. Maybe it's for tea. Maybe it's for a memory. The wind howls down from the mountains, rattling the shutters in a way that feels deliberate, like someone reminding you of all the stories left unfinished. And today, you remember one. A story he told once while sharpening his sword. It was about a man who buried his blade beneath the hearth of his home because he swore he'd never need it again. Not because the world's kind, he said, but because I choose to be. You hadn't thought of that story in months. You glance toward your own hearth now. Nothing buried beneath it except maybe hope and a bit of spilled mead from last Yule. Your hands pause. You set down the needle, and you walk to the cupboard. Inside, wrapped in linen, is the thing you never touch, his sword. Not ornate, not grand, just well-used. Familiar. A bit chipped near the hilt where it once caught a Saxon axe. You draw it out slowly, laying it across your lap. Not for defense, just to remember the weight of him. Mainstream historical fact. Viking warriors rarely carried their blades for show. Swords were costly earned inherited, passed down like memory. A sword was a story sharpened, tempered, named. Some were believed to hold spirits, others curses. Most held fingerprints and blood. His sword bears no name, but you remember how he held it. Loose in the grip like he respected its edge but didn't fear it. You place it on the table beside the comb and the stone with a hole. The little shrine is growing. Odd pieces, soft stories, a man made visible only by what he left behind. There's a knock at the door. You startle. Not used to company unless expected. You open it to find Einar, your husband's friend, crewmate. One of the men who did return. He looks older than last time, thinner. His beard is patchy with frost and streaked with white. His eyes avoid yours. Cold, he says. You step aside, he enters. Doesn't sit. Just stands near the fire, rubbing his hands as though thawing something deeper than skin. You offer him tea. He nods. The silence between you is taut as bowstring. Then he says it. I never told you what happened. The air thins. You don't ask him to, you just listen. He speaks slowly. There was a storm. Worse than any we'd seen. 3 days with no sky. Just wind and white. We tried to anchor but lost the mast. We drifted. You gripped the edge of the table. And him, Einar, looks at the fire. He tied himself to the rudder. Said he wouldn't let the ship turn on us. Said if he held her steady, we might survive. Your throat tightens. He did. For a while. Einar swallows hard, but then the rope snapped. Just once. Like it knew the moment. He looks up at you finally. I watched him vanish. He didn't scream, just looked back once. Like he knew you were watching, you cover your mouth. Not to muffle a sob, but to hold in everything. Einar places something on the table, a strip of cloth. Your husband's. The one he wrapped around his wrist before he left. The one you embroidered with a blue knot to match your wedding braid. Quirky detail Vikings often wore tokens from home into battle or on voyages, not for fashion, but to tether them to what mattered. You always thought it was superstition. Now you're not sure. Einar leaves soon after. No long goodbye, no false comforts, just a nod. The fire crackles. The cloth is warm in your palm. You place it with the sword, with the comb, with the stone. You sit, and for the first time in many weeks you cry. Not because he's gone, but because now finally you know where he ended. You don't speak for 3 days. Not to anyone. Not to the wind. Not even to the fire. The silence isn't hollow. It's full brimming with the stillness so deep it swallows footsteps and thoughts alike. You move through the cottage like a shadow, hands on things that no longer need touching. Smoothing blankets already flat, folding linens already folded, stirring a pot you don't plan to eat from. The cloth he wore around his wrist now lies across the mantel, gently curled beside the comb and the stone. You don't touch it, you don't need to. Its presence is louder than anything you could say. The villagers notice. Marta knocks once, then leaves a loaf of bread on your doorstep. Gudrun pretends she came by just to return a spoon you never loaned her. No one asks what Einar said. They already know. You sit by the hearth and stare at the fire. Not waiting, not grieving, just holding space. Mainstream historical fact. In Norse tradition, when someone died at sea with no body to bury families, would often craft a symbolic grave, sometimes shaped like a ship made from stones or turf, where they could lay offerings and prayers. It wasn't about where the body lay, it was about where memory could rest. You realize on the third morning that you need to build one. Not for him. For you. So you gather what's needed. Smooth stones from the fjord's edge bark stripped from a birch tree driftwood, still damp with salt. You find a spot on the bluff above the shoreline where the wind comes soft, and the sea always murmurs low like it's trying to confess something. You lay the stones in a curve. A longboat shape. Not large, just enough to hold the shape of remembrance. The driftwood forms the ribs. You wedge his comb in at the prow. The wrist cloth you tuck beneath a flat rock at the stern. And the sword? You carry it wrapped in linen. You kneel in the snow, place it at the center of the cairn, and rest your hand on the hilt for a long time before letting go. I release you, you whisper. The wind catches your breath, and for a moment it sounds like someone breathing back. You sit beside your creation until the sun sinks low and your fingers grow numb. The sea below remains indifferent, but the stones hold the shape of something sacred now. Quirky tidbit. Some believe that unburied dead could become Draugr restless spirits who wander the earth angry and unfinished. But others believe that if their name was spoken with love, their spirit found peace even without a grave. You speak his name now, quietly, with no audience but the gulls, and for the first time it doesn't tear something inside you open. It stitches something closed. That night you return home and open the chest at the foot of your bed. You pull out the letters, the ones you wrote and sent, and the ones you didn't. Each birch bark curl, each cloth scrap, each rune-carved line. You read them. Every single one. Out loud, by firelight. You read them like a saga, like a lullaby. Like truth. When the last line is spoken, you gather them in your arms and walk to the hearth. The fire has burned down to quiet embers. You feed them in one by one, not to forget, but to honor. The flames flicker gold and gentle. They don't rage, they don't hiss. They just take what you give and make warmth out of it. You sit until the last scrap curls into ash. You don't cry. You've already done that. Tonight you simply rest your head on your arms and let the silence be something new. Not grief, not waiting. Just silence. And in that silence you hear a future you didn't expect. One with fewer letters. And more living. The house feels different now. Lighter. As if something has stepped out of it. Something invisible that had been pressing on the beams, hiding in the corners, curling up beneath the furs at night like a second, colder version of you. You wake with a new thought, not a grand one. Just this: I should air the linens. It's not a battle cry, but it's something. You fling the shutters open and the cold rushes in like a dog off its leash. It bites your cheeks and makes your eyes water. Still, you smile. The linens flap stiffly in the wind, their corners snapping with tiny violence. You pin them with wooden clips and lean back against the doorframe, watching the steam of your breath rise and drift. You think about how absurd it is, this life waiting, folding, stitching, whispering, and yet you're still here. A little less broken, a little more you. Today you bake. Not because there's anyone to feed, but because the smell of warm bread is a kind of forgiveness. You grind barley mix and dried berries, knead the dough until your arms ache. While it rises, you find yourself humming. You don't recognize the tune. Maybe it's something your mother sang, or something he once whistled off key. It doesn't matter, it fills the space between the floor and the rafters, and the house hums along in its own way. Mainstream historical fact: Norse homes were rarely silent. Between weaving looms, children, livestock, and fire crackle, there was always some sound. To be completely quiet was unnatural and sometimes considered ominous. Today, your house is noisy. The fire pops. The bread hisses. The wind groans in the chimney like it's singing backup. You take it as a good sign. After the bread is done, you wrap a loaf in cloth and walk it over to Gudrun. She opens the door in a flurry of scarf and surprise. For me, she asks, eyeing the warm bundle. For you, you nod. And your goats. But they have to ask nicely. She chuckles and leans on the doorframe. Heard about what Einar said. You nod. She pauses, then says, You seem taller. You raise an eyebrow. I'm the same height. Maybe. But you're taking up more space again. You walk home slower, letting your boots crunch through the melting snow. You look at the sea and feel no pressure to speak to it. Not today. But as you pass the bluff where your ship-shaped stone shrine rests, you pause. Something's different. Not wrong, just moved. The cloth you'd tucked beneath the sternstone has been pulled free by the wind. It flutters now, pinned between stones like a flag. You climb the small rise fingers, brushing the linen smooth again. And you feel it. Not in your skin. Not in your heart. Deeper than that. A shift. As if the sea has finally exhaled. You sit beside the cairn, not to mourn, but to keep company. You don't bring a letter. You bring yourself. Your breath, your warmth, your small, stubborn pulse. Quirky belief. It was said that on the 17th day after death, a soul made its final choice to linger or to move on. You never put much stock in numbers, but you count today's date anyway just in case. 17 days since Einar knocked on your door. You rest your hand on the sword hilt one last time and say softly, "I'll keep the fire warm, just in case." Then you rise and leave it behind. Back home, you begin rearranging the house. Nothing drastic. Just turning the bed to face the sea. Hanging your best tapestry on the wall opposite the door. You sweep out the corners you've ignored for months and find a dried rose tucked behind a basket one he gave you the summer before he left. You put it in a cup on the windowsill. You don't write tonight. You don't need to. Instead, you light a single candle, sit beside it, and let your hands rest. The house doesn't creak like it used to. The fire burns clean. And you, for the first time in seasons, are not waiting for anything. You are simply being. You wake to snowlight spilling through the cracks in the shutter, a blue-white hush that softens the world before it even begins. You stretch beneath the furs and feel something new in your bones. Stillness, but not the kind that comes from waiting. The kind that comes from having survived. There's no letter to write today, no offering to make, no message to whisper into the wind. You feel oddly empty-handed and realize that's a kind of freedom too. Still, your fingers itch for movement. Not distraction, intention. You reach for the small birch box you keep near the hearth. Inside, scraps of bark, tiny bone pins, bits of red thread, and the rune carving knife he once gave you because you keep stealing mine anyway. You smile. You take out a piece of birch bark and begin etching. Not a letter, a charm. A talisman for protection, the kind vulvas once carried, etched with runes that whisper of shelter and strength. You're no seer, no priestess, but you remember the shapes. Your mother taught you when you were a girl, with knees always dirty and questions that wouldn't sit still. Mainstream historical fact. Viking runes weren't just letters, they were symbols of power. They told fortune's blessed warriors, marked graves, and whispered protection into ships before they met the sea. Some runes were scratched into weapons, others into bone or birch or even skin. You carve the algae's rune protection. Then Aiwa's endurance. Finally, Rido for journeys the kind you now know don't always need ships. When it's done, you tie it with red thread and hang it above the door. Not because you're afraid, because you're prepared. You head out to gather kindling. The air is sharp, but not cruel. A low fog clings to the path and the trees wear snow like sleepy cloaks. Each branch sighs gently under the weight, and somewhere above a raven croaks a single call. You glance up. It's perched on the old pine. Watching, you narrow your eyes. Don't you start, you mutter. It flaps off with what you swear is a laugh. Quirky belief. Some say ravens carry messages from Odin himself, thoughts and memories, snatched from mortals like breadcrumbs. Others say they're just birds who enjoy looking smug. Both are probably right. You pause by the bluff again, glancing at the cairn. It stands solid, quiet, rimmed with frost. You don't go closer. It doesn't need you today. Instead, you walk past it following a game trail through the snow. It leads you into the trees where the world is muffled and hollow and beautifully blank. You don't know why you came this way, not until you find the birch grove. It's quiet here, holy almost. The trees stand tall and white, their trunks streaked with ink-dark lines like veins. You breathe deep. The air tastes of sap and stories. And then you see it, carved into the bark of one tree, not deep, not recent but real. A rune. The same rune you carved this morning. Righto. You reach out and touch it. The edges are weathered. This wasn't your hand. Not recently, but it's the same shape. You don't cry, you just smile. Soft, honest. You sit beneath that tree and rest your back against its bark. Maybe you passed this way once. Maybe someone else lost or seeking carved the same thought into the world. Either way, it's a reminder you're not the only one who's left messages in the quiet. You stay until the sun nudges the sky toward amber, then walk home with a new rhythm in your steps. Not lighter, but steadier. That night, you don't light every candle. Just one. The one beside the rune charm, its flame flickering gold against the door. You make stew. Eat slowly. Fold your mittens and tuck them into a basket to trade later. You don't write, you don't need to. But before you sleep, you whisper to the empty space beside your bed, not in grief, but in memory. If you're still walking, I hope the trees are kind to you. And then you turn towards sleep, not as escape, but as a place to meet whatever dream may come. The storm begins before dawn. Not with thunder, not with screaming wind, but with pressure. A hush that settles over the village like a woolen blanket soaked in cold. The air feels thick, expectant. Your breath fogs before you've even opened the door, and the horizon has vanished into a grayness so complete, it might as well be the edge of the world. You wake with the ache in your knees that always knows before the sky does. Inside, the fire has died down to embers. You prod it back to life with practiced hands, whispering to the coals like an old friend. Come on, I still need you. Outside, the first snow begins to fall. Thick, slow flakes that swirl sideways, ignoring gravity. You close the shutters, bolt them tight, and brace the door. This isn't a storm you'll walk through. This is one you'll wait out. By mid-morning, the cottage creaks under the weight of the wind. You boil water, brew pine needle tea, and sit by the hearth, wrapping your shawl tighter. The storm has made the world smaller. Your house is the whole universe now. Everything outside can wait. And then comes the knock. 3 times. Slow, intentional. You freeze. The wind howls around the edges of the door. The fire shifts flickers, you don't breathe. Then another knock. Not a dream. Not the wind. You rise. Carefully. Slowly. You cross the floor in silence, press your ear to the wood. Nothing. And then a voice. Faint. Raspy. Please. You unbolt the door, and there he is, or what's left of him. Einar. Not the same man who visited you weeks ago with ash in his beard and guilt in his eyes? No. This Einar is hollowed out. His skin blue-tinged, his hands trembling, ice crusting his cloak. He stumbles forward, collapses into your arms. You drag him inside. Strip away the frozen layers, wrap him in furs, place him near the fire. You press warm tea into his hands and crouch beside him, waiting for his breath to steady. He doesn't speak for a long time. Just stares into the flames like they're speaking a language only he remembers. Then finally he whispers, I lied to you. You stay quiet. I said I saw him vanish. I didn't. You breathe. Slowly. Go on. Einar's hands shake. Whether from cold or regret, you can't tell. We crashed. Near the eastern shore, I was thrown clear. So was he. We both made it. He won't look at you. He was alive, but wounded. His leg, his ribs. Bad. You swallow hard, and we found a village. They took us in. He begged me to leave. Said I had people to return to. That he didn't. Your heart drops. He said you'd mourn better than you'd forgive. Silence. You don't speak. Because what is there to say? The truth arrives like snow, soft but heavy. He stayed behind, helped rebuild their docks, took a new name, a quiet life. You close your eyes. Why are you telling me now, you ask? Einar doesn't answer for a long time. Then, because he died last winter and he told me to bring you this. He reaches into his coat and pulls out something wrapped in sealskin. You unwrap it with shaking hands. It's his carving knife. The one you lost. The one he swore had wanderlust. You press it to your chest and inhale. It smells faintly of smoke. Pine. And something else. Home. Mainstream historical fact. Some Viking warriors who survived shipwreck or exile never returned to their homelands. They built new lives elsewhere, blending into other cultures, trading their swords for tools, their names for peace. Their families never knew. Their stories became footnotes or vanished entirely. You sit by the fire with Einar, neither of you speaking. The storm howls. And slowly you realize, this is what truth feels like. Not a sword, not a letter, just a man shivering beside your hearth with the final piece of the story you didn't want but needed. Quirky belief. It's said that if a man's blade returns home, even if he doesn't, his spirit finds rest. You look down at the knife, then at Einar, and for the first time you don't cry. You just place a new log on the fire, tuck the knife into the shrine on your mantle, and whisper, "Thank you." Not to Einar, to him. Because now, finally, you know he didn't forget you. He just let you go. You don't sleep that night. The storm rages like it's trying to rewrite the coastline, and Einar lies wrapped in furs beside the hearth, snoring softly, his breath a fragile rhythm that assures you he's still tethered to this world. You sit upright in your chair, carving knife in hand, tracing its familiar handle again and again with your thumb. He kept it. All these years through storms and shipwrecks in the hands of strangers in a village where your name meant nothing, he kept it. That alone says more than words ever could. By dawn, the storm softens. The wind hums instead of howls. You rise, stretch your stiff limbs, and place another log on the fire before stepping outside. The world is white and changed. Snow has cloaked the village in silence. The trees wear it like ceremonial robes, and the rooftops brim with thick layers that sparkle faintly under the heavy gray sky. You inhale deeply. The air tastes sharp and new. You kneel and begin shoveling a path to the woodpile, each scoop a small declaration. I am here. I am moving forward. Back inside, Einar stirs. His face is drawn. His eyes sink in deeper now, but something has lifted from his shoulders. Maybe the storm. Maybe the truth. You place a bowl of hot broth in his hands. He doesn't thank you, but he meets your gaze with something quieter. Gratitude, and perhaps relief. I'll go, he says between slow sips. You shake your head. Not yet. Let the storm finish mourning. You sit across from him, both of you quiet. Both of you exhausted from different kinds of travel. After he eats, he rests again, and you finally allow yourself to sleep. Not slumped in the chair, but properly in your bed beneath the furs he once chose for you at the autumn market. Back when warmth was a thing you shared, not chased. You wake in the afternoon, the house quiet except for the fire. Einar is gone. Not a note. Not a word. Just gone. But the front door is latched gently, the kind of exit that says, I walked away, not ran. Mainstream historical fact. Hospitality in Viking culture was sacred. Even enemies could seek shelter from storms and be granted bread and fire. To offer warmth to the lost was to honor the gods, and to accept it, a quiet covenant of peace. You don't chase him, you don't need to. You make tea and sit beside the hearth, the carving knife now resting in your lap. You don't sharpen it, you don't use it, you just let it rest. Later that day, you walk to the bluff. The cairn still stands buried under a mound of snow. You brush it gently, revealing the outline of the boat shape you once formed. The wrist cloth remains frozen stiff to the stone. You kneel and press your palm to the center where his sword lies beneath. Your story's home now, you whisper. And you mean it. You leave the stone untouched. On your way back, you pass the children of the village hurling snowballs and slipping on purpose. One of them offers you a snowball. You accept. Then throw it squarely at Gudrun's oldest son. You don't even pretend to be sorry. Quirky tidbit Norse children believed snowballs thrown during the first storm of the year carried wishes. Some whispered into them before launching them across the field. Others just threw hard and hoped the gods were watching. You didn't wish, but maybe the snow knew what you needed anyway. That evening you begin a new weaving project. Not a tunic, not something to trade. Something for you. Something warm, bright. You choose thread dyed in gold and deep indigo and red, the color of ash-stained embers. You don't sketch it, you just begin. The pattern takes shape slowly. Knotwork waves a boat with no oars gliding forward on still water. No letters tonight, no shrines to tend, just a new story beginning at your fingertips. And when you finally lay down to sleep, the house doesn't feel like a tomb. It feels like shelter. It feels like yours. The snow doesn't melt for days. Each morning you rise to a world glazed in white, the sky low and moody like a bowl turned upside down. It presses against your roof, your ribs, your resolve. But you're no longer afraid of weight. You've carried heavier things, grief, silence, love that outlived its shape. Today you take your weaving outside. You bundle yourself in wool, clutch the cloth frame to your chest, and march through the snow like a general heading into battle with fewer soldiers but better posture. You sit by the fire pit you used last summer for drying fish. Now it's just a stone circle buried in snow. You sweep off a seat and settle in, breath-fogging fingers working the threads with frozen elegance. Birds return slowly. A sparrow flits past. Then a crow black against the silver sky. Then nothing. And yet, everything. Your weaving takes form. The little boat you stitched yesterday now sails past a stitched mountain, its sail curled like a secret. You add a figure to the boat, not him. Not you. Just someone. Someone continuing. Mainstream historical fact. Viking women were expert weavers not just in fabric, but in metaphor. Cloth was currency, symbolism, survival. In some Norse myths, fate itself was a loom, and life merely the weaving of the Norns. 3 sisters who spun, measured, and cut the threads of all men's lives. You like the idea that you might hold the thread yourself now, that no one's cutting it but you. That afternoon, Gudrun visits. She sits beside you in the snow, grumbling about her joints and praising your stubbornness in the same breath. She watches your hands move over the loom for a long time before speaking. He's at peace, you know. You nod. So am I. She sighs. You'll marry again. You raise an eyebrow? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Time will. You smile without answering. You don't owe her one. She points at your weaving. That's new. It's not for trade, you reply. Good. Keep something for yourself for once. She stands to leave, brushing snow from her skirt. I left you some fish on the stoop, she adds. Don't let the foxes get it. They're bold this winter, you thank her. But you wait until she's gone to retrieve the fish. The foxes have manners, they'll wait. As night falls, you hang your weaving on the wall. Not hidden, not behind anything. Centered, proud. It's not perfect, but it's yours. You eat the fish, seasoned with dried garlic and a little honey, and stare at the fire with the satisfaction of a woman who has nothing to prove. And then you write not a letter, not to the sea, to yourself. You take a fresh scrap of birch bark and etch the words slowly the way you used to etch runes into dry dough with your thumb as a girl. You survived. You softened. You are not broken. You are the flame, not the ash. You read it aloud. Then you fold it and place it in your pocket. Quirky belief. In some sagas, a woman who carried her own words close to her heart was said to become immune to lies. The logic being, if you know your own truth, no one else can twist it. You fall asleep early, curled beneath furs that no longer smell like him but don't have to. You dream of a shoreline where no one is waiting, and no one is lost. Just people. Living. The tide washes in. And you let it. You begin to sing again. Not full songs, not ballads from the old days, just half-hummed lines while you stir the pot or sweep the floor notes that wander from your throat without permission. You don't remember learning them. You don't need to. They live in your bones like the cold, like the grief, like the stubborn fire that refuses to go out. One afternoon, while chopping roots for stew, you catch yourself singing the same tune he used to whistle when sharpening his knife. You pause. The knife is gone, given to the stones now, but the song remains. You don't stop singing. It's not betrayal, it's memory softening into comfort. Later, a girl from the village arrives with her mother's spindle. Its cracked split clean down the center from a careless knock against the hearthstone. She's sheepish the way young people are when something old breaks. You take it from her gently. Not ruined, you say. Just shifted. You show her how to bind it with sinew, how to glue the edges with boiled pine sap, how to polish the grain until it forgets the split. When you hand it back to her, she smiles wide and bright. Did you learn this from your husband? She asks. You consider. No, you say. I learned it from being alone. Mainstream historical fact. Viking women inherited skills from both parents: woodwork, medicine, weaving, storytelling, animal care. They became keepers of continuity, especially in the absence of men shaping not just cloth and food, but entire generations. You walk the girl to the edge of the village and watch her disappear into the blue-gray mist curling up from the hills. Then, for reasons you don't fully understand, you take the long way home. It leads you past the old forge, now silent, and past the dock where the boys are pretending to build a ship from snow and broken oars. One of them waves at you. You wave back. And then you find yourself in front of Einar's old house. He never returned to it, but someone's been there. The snow is shoveled. A pelt hangs drying over the fence. There's a bundle of herbs tied above the door, not for flavor, but protection. You wonder who lives there now, and whether they know the story of the man who fled, then came back just long enough to be honest. You keep walking. When you reach the bluff, you stop. Not to mourn, not to kneel, just to stand. You breathe in the sea air, sharp and salt-bitten. The stone cairn still holds half-sunk now under a crust of new snow. The sword's memory hums faintly beneath your feet. The cloth, long since frozen into the stones, flutters slightly in the breeze. You touch your chest where the birch bark message rests in your pocket. Still there. Still true. Back home, you open the shutters for the first time in weeks. Light floods the room in thick, honeyed ribbons. It shows you dust you'd missed, scratches in the floor, the curl of the comb's teeth. But instead of fixing or hiding, you just leave them. Not everything broken must be repaired. You light a candle not because it's dark, but because it feels right. You brew tea with dried mint and honeycomb. You sit by the fire, and you do nothing. Nothing urgent, nothing productive. Just nothing. Because rest is a kind of mending too. Quirky belief of the day. Some Norse healers believed that silence could stitch wounds no salve could reach. They'd send mourners into the forest, not with incense or charms, but with the instruction to listen to trees. Let the wind unpick the knots. You close your eyes and imagine wind pulling gently at your seams. Not to tear, but to release. And as you exhale, you realize you no longer live in the shape of his absence. You live in your own shape now. One carved gently by time, by memory, by snow and songs and silence. And you hum again. Just softly. A raven follows you now. Not every day, but often enough that you start to recognize its ragged wing, the way one tail feather juts sideways like a sailor too proud to admit he's limping. It perches on fence posts on rooftops, even once on your windowsill staring in, as if you're the one being watched from the other side of the glass. You call it half a short for half a lie, because you don't trust it not entirely. But you don't chase it off either. You've lived with silence, with unanswered questions. A little trickster bird is nothing. This morning you offered a bit of dried fish. It takes the gift without fanfare and flies off, disappearing into the mist over the fjord. You watch it until it becomes just a dot, then a memory. Inside the kettle sings. You answer it. You've started keeping 2 cups on the table again. Not because you expect anyone, but because it reminds you that you still know how to make space. Mainstream historical fact ravens were sacred in Norse myth. Odin's messengers, his memory and thought given wing. Some believed they guided the dead, others that they were watchers between worlds, and a few old crones insisted they carried news not just of battles, but of homecomings. Maybe Halfa is watching over you, or maybe he's just hungry. Today you return to your weaving. The boat you stitched weeks ago is finished now, sailing across a panel of deep indigo threads, its sail open its wake, trailing behind in tight white knots. You add stars above it, not in constellations, just scattered like snowflakes caught mid-fall. You hum as you work. Later you take the cloth down from its frame and fold it into your pack, because today, for the first time in a long time, you leave the village. Not far. Just across the ridge where an old woman lives in a hut sloped like a question mark and roofed with moss thick as blankets. She's a healer, a weaver, a widow, and she's asked you to bring her new thread. You find her waiting by the door, steaming cup in hand eyes, sharp enough to flay arrogance off a warrior's tongue. "You're late," she says. "I brought stars," you reply, unfolding the weaving. She nods once, taps the cloth. "This boat's not for him." You blink. "No," you admit. She grunts approval. "Good." She brings you inside. The air smells of pine resin and crushed lavender. Herbs hang in every corner. There's a cat on the windowsill, smug and ancient. You sit. She pours tea. Neither of you speak much. After a while, she asks, "Are you still writing?" You shake your head. No more letters to the sea. She sips. Good. The sea doesn't write back. You leave her cottage before sunset, weaving tucked back into your pack lighter somehow, like it's been seen. Understood. Blessed by another woman who knows the weight of waiting, the shape of sorrow. On your walk back, Halfa circles once overhead. He drops something small, a shell. It lands with a soft plop in the snow. You pick it up. Not because it means anything, but because it might. Quirky tidbit. Some believe that gifts from ravens carried messages from the dead, but the real magic was in how you received them. Doubt twisted them into omens. Gratitude turned them into comfort. You tuck the shell into your pocket beside your birch bark note. At home you hang your weaving not above the hearth, but beside the bed, where you can see it when you rise and when you rest. You light a candle. Pour 2 cups of tea. Sit quietly with yourself and whisper. Thank you, not to him, not to Halfa. To you for staying, for softening, for surviving long enough to start again. The snow begins to melt, not in torrents, not all at once, but in slow, shy drips that trace silver lines down your window panes. Patches of earth reappear like bruises healing. The air smells different now, less like cold, more like waking. Your boots sink deeper in mud than snow, and the chickens have started clucking like they finally remember what the sun looks like. You walk the village with your shawl unpinned, hair loose. A quiet rebellion. People nod to you differently now, not with pity, not with hesitation. Just recognition. You're no longer the woman waiting at the shore. You're the one who stayed, who wove the grief into patterns and stitched herself back together with no needle but time. The younger women begin asking questions. How do you dye thread with onion skins? Is it true you can tell someone's future by the shape of their stitch? Did your husband really talk to birds? You answer the first 2. You dodge the third. Because maybe he did. Or maybe that was just the kind of magic you wanted to believe in. Mainstream historical fact. Viking women often served as the oral historians of their communities, passing down stories, traditions, recipes, and practical knowledge. Many were revered as wise women, especially those who had known both love and loss. Their strength wasn't in swinging swords, but in remembering what others forgot. You spend one morning teaching a girl to braid rope from seagrass. She's clumsy at first, her fingers all tangle and chatter. But she laughs through it, and eventually her braid holds. You tie it off and say, "You've just made something that won't unravel." That matters. She beams. You return home to find another offering from Halfa on the windowsill. A piece of driftwood this time, smoothed by the sea. It's shaped like nothing, or maybe like everything. You run your fingers over its ridges and don't bother asking what it means. You place it on your mantle beside the shell, the comb, the stone, the cloth, the carving knife. Your altar has grown strange but not heavy. That afternoon, you walk to the cairn for the first time in weeks. You bring nothing. You don't need to. The stones are bare now. The snow has receded. His sword still buried beneath hums faintly beneath your boots, the way iron sometimes does when it remembers. You sit for a while, listen to the waves. They sound different now. Not gentler, but less personal. Like you've been released from some ancient contract of salt and waiting. You speak softly. I'm not coming here for you anymore. You mean it. I'm coming here for me. You stay until the sun slips low, painting the sea in bruised gold and the wind smells briefly, painfully like spring. Then you walk home. On your way, you notice something strange in the path. A line of footprints, small, light. They weren't there before, and they don't belong to you. You crouch beside them, press your fingers into one. Fresh. Someone passed this way recently, but the village is behind you. No one ahead, no one visible. You rise slowly, Not afraid. Just curious. Quirky belief. In some Norse tales, when the dead were finally at peace, they left signs, footprints in unlikely places, birds carrying gifts, dreams that felt like farewells. Not hauntings, not visits. Just quiet messages. You may live now. You are not followed. You turn and walk home without looking over your shoulder. Inside, you light a single candle just as dusk settles like breath against the windows. You sew for a little while, not out of habit, but because your hands feel steady again. Then you sleep. And that night, you dream of the shore. But you are not standing there. You are walking away from it, into a forest filled with bird-song hands, empty heart light, and the faint sound of laughter just ahead, whether his or yours you do not know. And for once, you do not need to know. The thaw comes with noise. Rivulets race down the hillside, carving new lines through old paths. Icicles fall from the eaves with sharp little cracks punctuating the air like a language of melting. The ground squelches underfoot, and boots that were once steady now slip in unexpected places. You don't mind. The mess is honest. You take the long way to the village again, basket swinging from your elbow. Inside goat cheese, wrapped in cloth, a roll of linen for Marta's daughter's wedding dress, and a small jar of rendered seal fat for trade. The road takes you past the dock. And today, something different. A boat. A stranger's boat, low-slung and salt-worn, tied loosely at the far end of the pier. Not a warship, not a fishing vessel. Something in between. Quiet, practical. Its sail is furled, but its ropes are fresh, its wood well-oiled. You pause. No one in the village owns that boat. And yet no alarm has sounded. No shouts. No one seems to mind. The market is alive with spring chatter. Women compare butter. Men complain about the state of their axes. Children dart through stalls, sticky-fingered and loud. It all buzzes in your ears like a language you've just begun to remember how to speak. Then you hear it. A whisper of your name. You turn. And there, near the edge of the crowd, half-shadowed, hands behind his back. Hair streaked with silver as Einar. Not hollowed this time, not fleeing. He nods once. You nod back. He walks toward you slowly. No weight of guilt in his gait. Just a man with something to say. He stops a few paces away. "I didn't come to stay," he says. You smile faintly. "Good." He chuckles. "I came to give you something." From his coat he draws out a necklace leather cord worn smooth with time. At the end hangs a simple pendant. Your husband's. The one he carved for you before he left, shaped like a spiral of waves, edges notched by thumbprints in time. "I was keeping it," Einar says, "until I knew you weren't." You take it, and this time your hands don't shake. You look up at him. You think he stayed in that village for peace, you say. He doesn't answer. You nod. I think he stayed because he knew I'd survive. Mainstream historical fact. In some Norse burial rites, personal items weren't always burned or buried. Sometimes they were passed on to friends, kin, those who had endured the story. It wasn't inheritance, it was recognition. You carried the grief. You've earned the memory. Einar leaves the necklace in your palm and turns to go. He doesn't say farewell. You don't watch him board the boat. You just turn and walk the other way. Back home, you place the pendant not on the mantle but around your neck. It settles just beneath your collarbone, light and warm from your hand. You touch it once, then leave it alone. That evening, the wind carries in new sounds. Frogs croaking in the low grass. The thin trickle of meltwater returning to the sea. The echo of a market laugh that lingers longer than it should. You don't write it down. You just listen. Quirky belief. Some say that when the dead are truly at peace, they stop appearing in dreams. You're not sure yet, but last night, for the first time in years, you dreamt of yourself walking through tall grass arms, empty face turned toward the sun. No ships, no waiting, just sky. You light a candle. Pour a cup of tea. 1 cup. Because you've remembered something vital. You are enough company for yourself. And when you sleep, it is deep, unhaunted, unhurried, unwritten. The air is soft now, not warm exactly, but softened like butter left near the hearth too long. The snow has mostly retreated to the shadows. The paths are clear again, and the first shoots of green peek from the black earth, like secrets testing the light. You start sleeping with the shutters open. The breeze plays at the hem of your blanket, carrying in the smell of pine sap and wet stone. You dream less. And when you do, it's of walking, always forward. This morning you find the village already stirring. The men are setting nets. The women are stringing herbs to dry. Someone plays a bone flute in the distance, clumsy notes that wobble but don't break. You help Gudrun harvest the first handfuls of wild garlic, her fingers still nimble despite the ache in her knuckles. You ask no questions, offer no stories, but she eyes you sideways and says, "You've got new dreams behind your eyes." You smirk. "I was just thinking about stew." "Same thing," she replies. Later, you gather driftwood along the shoreline basket, creaking against your hip. The sea is almost mirror smooth today. No wind, just tide. Slow and certain. And that's when you see it. A figure alone standing at the end of the old dock. Not Einar, not anyone you know. But something about their posture, the tilt of the head, the weight in the shoulders feels familiar. As if grief shaped them too. You pause. Watch. They don't turn. Don't move. Just stand. Then, as if sensing your gaze, they raise their hand, in a gesture not quite a wave, not quite a goodbye. You raise yours in return. They leave nothing behind. They take nothing with them. They walk back down the dock and vanish between the boats. You never see their face. You walk home through the heather, running your fingers through the tips just beginning to bud. Mainstream historical fact: Vikings often believed that certain strangers were sent by the gods not to test but to mirror, to show you what you'd become or what you might still be. In sagas, these figures rarely speak. They appear, they disappear, and something changes. You don't know what changed today, but something did. Back at home, you find the weaving you hung near your bed. You lift it down. And for the first time, you stitch something new onto it. Not a boat, not a storm, not a shore. A hand open, palm facing upward, waiting not for a return, but to offer something. You embroider slowly the red thread, like breath pulled from your own lungs. And when it's done, you place the weaving back on the wall. A new chapter. Quirky detail. Some women embroidered messages into their tapestries, hidden meanings in color and knot. You've never claimed to be a storyteller, but maybe your hands have been telling one all along. That evening, you build a small fire outside your home. The air is too clean to ignore. You sit on a fur blanket, watch the flames curl, and let your thoughts wander. You imagine him not dead, not lost, but simply absent. And that feels okay. Because you are not. You are here, living, breathing, mending, not waiting. You fall asleep with your head against the doorframe fire, dying to embers, the necklace resting against your chest like punctuation at the end of a sentence. And your final thought before sleep takes you, not a letter, not a name, just a quiet truth. I made it. The sun rises before you do now. Its light slips over the mountains like spilled mead, golden and patient, finding the cracks in your shutters, the gaps between your fingers. When you wake, the birds are already arguing in the trees and the cottage is warm without the fire's help. You stretch beneath the furs and feel not young exactly, but well stitched, held together in all the right places. You rise slowly, there is no urgency. You braid your hairpin back the loose strands and take your time over breakfast. The bread is fresh your own and the butter is sharp and sweet. You hum between bites, not a tune you recognize. Just a tune that likes your voice. Outside, the grass is turning green in streaks and tiny white flowers have erupted along the edge of the path like laughter. The goats watch you pass with suspicious eyes. You wink at them. I'm watching you, too. They blink, unimpressed. You head to the water, but not to the bluff, not to the cairn. You take the south trail instead, one that winds through a thicket of birch and ends at a quiet cove where the tide pools catch the sky in their bowls. It's a place you haven't visited since before the storm. Since before Einar. Since before everything. You walk the shore barefoot, letting the cold nip at your toes, salt stinging the small scrapes time has softened. You crouch beside a pool and find your reflection staring up at you, wind-blown and sharp-eyed. You smile at her. She smiles back. Mainstream historical fact. Many Viking women wore small mirrors made of polished metal or obsidian. But reflection to them wasn't just vanity. It was introspection. A glimpse at the self, the soul, the survivor. A way to know where you'd been and to decide where to go next. You sit beside the tide pool and pull a scrap of cloth from your satchel. It's blank. You take out your thread and begin stitching, not with the usual deliberation, but quickly as if your hands know something your heart is still learning. You embroider a new scene, not a boat, not a hand, a path, winding forward, lined with stars. And in the distance, faint. Barely there a cottage with smoke rising and a woman standing in the doorway. Alone, but not lonely. You finish the last stitch just as the tide nudges your ankle. You don't move. You let it greet you. You whisper something into the wind, something small and quiet. Thank you for leaving, not in bitterness, not in grief, but with gratitude. Because the life you have now, it's yours. Completely. Quirky belief. In old Norse lullabies, mothers would sing to the sea itself, asking it not for safety but for strength. Not for quiet but for endurance. They believed the waves could hear and if not obey, then at least remember. You rise, brush the sand from your skirt, and turn homeward. When you reach your cottage, the fire is out, but the house is warm. You lay the new embroidery beside the others. You pour a single cup of tea. You place the raven's feather on the mantle beside the shell and driftwood a quiet, thanks to the bird who has not returned since the thaw. He doesn't need to. Neither do you. That night you sleep deeply. No dreams of boats. No dreams of him. Only the soft sound of the wind in the trees and the distant rhythm of waves on rock, no longer knocking, just breathing. You find the gull at dawn. It's perched on your windowsill like a thief trying to look innocent. Head-cocked eyes sharp, its webbed feet tapping once then again, as if to remind you I am not here for decoration. You open the shutter, half expecting it to flee. It doesn't. Instead, it blinks twice, then hops sideways, revealing something tied awkwardly to its leg. A note. A real one, not a dream, not a metaphor. A scrap of linen damp at the edges, bound in red thread. You stare at it, then untie it. It's short, a few lines written in a cramped hand. I didn't have the right words not then. I only have them now. Thank you for keeping your fire lit. Even when I couldn't see it, no name, no signature. But the handwriting is his. You know it the way you know your own breath. The gull squawks once, hops off the ledge, and flaps lazily toward the sea, its task complete. You hold the note in both hands. It doesn't tremble. Neither do you. You don't cry. You just nod as if across a distance only memory understands and say, softly, you're late. Then you smile. Because he came as a gull. Because of course he did. Quirky detail. Some Viking wives when left behind were said to whisper into the ears of birds. Crows, gulls, even swans. Messages for their missing husbands. The belief wasn't that the birds delivered replies, but that they carried presents. A knowing, a remembering. A winged ache returned? You pin the note beside your weaving. It belongs there. Not above the fire. Not hidden. Just seen. Later you walk to the market with a basket full of herbs, goat cheese, and 3 jars of pine salve. You trade with steady hands and a quicker smile. You laugh once when a child drops a turnip directly onto her own foot and curses in miniature. You walk home by way of the long route past the wildflowers now beginning to scatter their seeds in the breeze. You kneel in the grass, pluck one of the white blossoms, and press it into your palm until it bruises. A small offering, just for the day. Mainstream historical fact. Viking love letters rarely survived, but their runestones did. Etched in stone, they were declarations not just of conquest, but of affection. Some were carved by women, marking the land with names and promises. Not all were about endings. Some simply said, she lived, she remembered, she endured. That evening you sit outside. You don't write a reply. What would you say? There's nothing left that needs to be said. Instead you whisper a single word into the air. One you haven't spoken in moons. Goodbye. It doesn't echo, it doesn't sting. It just fades as soft as breath into the dusk. Inside you fold the shawl you once wrapped around your shoulders like armor. You store it away. The necklace still hangs at your throat, but now it feels lighter. Like a story with a full ending, not one chasing its tail. You braid your hair before sleep, humming as you do. And you dream not of ships, not of shores, but of a house by a stream. Of open windows, of a woman with ink on her fingers and light in her chest, of yourself, whole, here, alive. The forest path is quiet, blanketed in soft needles and the scent of warming earth. You walk it slowly, basket swaying at your side filled with early spring offerings. Wild garlic, a cracked egg-colored mushroom you won't eat, but know someone else will, and 3 duck eggs tucked into a bed of moss. The trees stretch overhead like cathedral arches, and the birds above weave their own sermons. You follow the path by instinct more than memory, now your feet, remembering even when your mind has gone still. This path used to feel longer, heavier. Today it feels like a song with a chorus you finally understand. Halfway to the ridge, you stop beside the fallen log, where you and he once sat arguing about how many stars made up the Great Bear. You said 7. He said 8, and insisted the 8th was secret, visible only after 2 cups of mead. You run your fingers over the bark now soft and crumbling and say aloud, still not 8. You think you hear a chuckle in the wind, but it might be your own. Back home you tidy. Not to distract, not to pretend. Just to bring things into order because your hands are steady now and your space deserves to feel cared for. You dust the corners of the hearth, reweave the mat by the door, and hang fresh bundles of thyme and sage. The weaving above your bed catches the light just so casting faint shadows that move when the breeze rolls in through the window. And in the evening, you find the box. You weren't looking for it. It lives beneath the loose plank by the bed, the one that creaks even when you tiptoe. You'd tucked it there moons ago, thinking you might never open it again. But tonight you do. Inside are the last few letters you never sent. Birch bark curled like sleeping leaves. Cloth squares etched in charcoal. Words never thrown to the sea. Words meant only for you. You unfold one and read. You're probably somewhere ridiculous right now arguing with someone about fish. I hope you're winning. I hope you smell like salt and stubbornness. You smile, you read another. I don't need a sign, I just need a silence that feels like love, not absence. That silence has finally come. You stack the letters gently. You could burn them, bury them, offer them to the wind. But instead you place them back in the box. Not because you still need them, but because they were part of the stitching. Mainstream historical fact. In some northern regions, when letters weren't delivered, they were kept in family homes, stored in carved wooden boxes hidden beneath stones or tucked into roof beams. Not forgotten, not erased, just honored as part of the journey. Later, as you sit outside under a sky rinsed clean by sunset, you bring out the last of the pine needle tea and sip it slowly. You trace the shape of the pendant at your neck and close your eyes. You don't think of him as lost anymore. You think of him as a place you once lived. A harbor, a season, a page turned, quirky belief. Some old sea wives said that when a widow could sleep through a storm without waking, it meant her heart had unknotted itself from the waves. You've slept soundly for weeks. No dreams of his voice, no ache in your chest. Just breath, just warmth, just here. And tonight you whisper no names into the dark. You simply say, tomorrow I'll plant something. And the night accepts it like a promise. Morning arrives on birdsong and dew. You step outside with bare feet, the grass cool and damp against your soles. There's no fire yet, no tea, no woven shawl. Just the simplicity of Nowskin kissed by air breath, rising like steam heart unhurried. You walk to the small patch of earth near the side of the house. The soil is soft dark, a little lumpy with stones, but it's good earth. Earth that remembers your weight, your tears, the countless steps you've taken in circles and lines and wanderings. Today you dig. Not deep, just enough. Your fingers push aside roots and pebbles. You press the seeds into the soil, yarrow, nettle, golden flax. Hardy plants, clever plants. The kind that know how to survive winter and still rise toward the light. Each one feels like a sentence. A line in a letter you're writing to no one and everyone at once. You smooth the dirt, pat it down, stand back. Nothing grows yet. Nothing will for weeks, but the act is enough. Later, while the stew simmers on the hearth, you take down your spindle. Your hands haven't forgotten how to twist, how to draw thread from tufts of wool. The rhythm returns like an old friend, slow and certain. Over, around, pull, repeat. You spin for hours. Not to sell, not to trade. Just to feel something becoming. Mainstream historical fact. Viking widows often continued the trades they had practiced with their husbands or even picked up new ones. Spinning, healing, teaching, storytelling. The sagas speak of them not with pity, but with reverence. Keepers of lore, menders of families, women, who did not vanish but unfolded. You think of that word now, unfolded. It fits you better than widow, better than lonely, even better than brave. Outside the clouds gather, but it doesn't rain. They just drift low and lazy like thoughts you no longer need to chase. You sit by the window with your spindle in your lap. Your letters tucked away, your weaving hung where the sun touches it each day. You no longer wait for birds to arrive with news. You no longer press your ear to the wind for whispers. You no longer ask the sea for answers, because you already have them. Quirky belief. Some said that the truest magic was the woman who stayed, who bore witness, who rebuilt, who dared to keep singing when the hall grew silent. They called her Saidkona, not sorceress, not widow, but something in between. Thread weaver, memory holder, one who bends time without breaking. Tonight you light a single candle. Not because it's dark, but because you like the way the flame dances when you breathe near it. You eat slowly. You hum without thinking. You sleep without armor. And as you drift, you hear the faintest sound outside, wind through the grass, or maybe a footstep. But you don't rise to check. If it's the past, it knows where the door is. And if it's the future, let it wait. You're not rushing anymore. There's a knock at your door, not the sea wind rattling the wood, not a raven pecking at the frame. A real knock. Gentle. Unhurried. You don't flinch. You wipe your hands on your skirt, set your bowl of herbs aside, and open the door with the same ease you use when turning a page. It's a girl. Maybe 14. Hair in 2 clumsy braids, a basket slung over one shoulder, sandals too large for her feet. She smells of wood smoke and rosemary. Behind her stands a goat, disinterested and chewing on a piece of rope. The girl fidgets. My aunt said you know how to teach things, she says. You tilt your head. Things like embroidery solves. Goat herdin'. She shrugs. Things that stop the crying. You nod once and step aside. Then you'd better come in. She does. Sits cross-legged by the hearth basket in her lap. Goat tied to your porch railing, still chewing. You don't press. Instead, you put on tea, tear a bit of bread, and ask her to help sort the chamomile. Her fingers are clumsy but eager. You begin with silence. Always silence first. Then slowly, almost accidentally, you start showing her the way of the thread. Not how to mend a cloak or weave a market bag, but how to stitch a wave. How to knot a star. How to make a shape from absence. She listens. You watch her, and for the first time in a long while, you see something strange in her expression. Recognition. Like looking into a mirror that shows not the past, but the part of you that kept going. Mainstream historical fact. In Norse culture, women often mentored younger girls not just in chores or duties, but in resilience. Knowledge passed down wasn't simply skill, it was survival. The ability to turn grief into guidance, to transform solitude into strength. You don't ask who she's lost. You don't ask why she came. Some answers arrive without questions. The afternoon slips by gently. You let her choose 2 bundles of herbs to take home. You offer her a spindle, the small one carved from driftwood, just the right weight. She takes it like a relic. You walk her to the edge of the trail. She hesitates, then asks, "Can I come again?" You smile. "Only if you bring less goat." She laughs. She walks away. You watch her braid disappear into the trees and realize you are no longer standing still. You've become part of the landscape, a warm place in a cold world, a keeper of letters, a weaver of endings. That evening, you write again. Not a letter, a list, just one word for each thing you want to remember. Fire, moss, raven, salt, birch, thread, breath, tea, light. You tuck it beside the letters you never sent. Quirky belief. In some sagas, a woman's soul was described not as a flame, but as a thread. One that wove through the lives of others long after she was gone, tightening, fraying, mending, but never vanishing. You run your fingers along your pendant. You feel your thread. It's warm, it's long, it's still weaving. You rise before the sun, not from restlessness, but from readiness. The village is hushed in blue shadow roofs, still blanketed with a night chill mist, paths slick with dew. You wrap your cloak loosely and step outside, not with purpose exactly, but with permission to wander, to listen, to notice. And what you notice most is how alive the silence feels now. It used to press. Now it opens. Used to ache. Now it breathes. You walk past the cairn, but don't stop. Past the old dock where the water laps soft against the worn posts. You reach the bluff. The place where so many letters had once launched, inked with ache, folded with hope, and flung into the wind like prayers. And for a moment you consider tossing something just to feel that old rhythm again. But your hands are empty, and that feels right. You sit instead. No speech, no script, just sky, just sea. Mainstream historical fact. The Norse believed that the sea held not just the bodies of the lost, but also their voices. That the ocean was memory incarnate, swelling with every shouted goodbye, every whispered regret, every unsent message. A keeper of stories too heavy for land. You think the sea has enough of your stories now. You close your eyes, not to dream, but to listen better. A gull cries overhead. A rabbit darts through the grass. A breeze lifts your hair just enough to tickle your cheek, just enough to feel like a hand brushing past. You smile. You old thief, you murmur to the air. You took what you wanted. But I got the rest, and the wind very softly sighs back. On the walk home you find the girl again, the one with the goat and the spindle. She's sitting on a stone tongue, out in concentration, twisting thread like she's trying to teach the fibers patience. She holds it up when she sees you. Better, she asks. You take the thread, examine it, roll it between your fingers. It's strong, you say, but softer than before. She grins. Like you pause, caught off guard by the truth of it. Then you nod. Yes, like me. She returns to her work. You keep walking. At your cottage, the sky turns gold as the sun lifts over the ridge, casting long shadows through your doorway. You pour tea into a single mug, but this time you leave the second cup out, not full, not waiting, just present. A quiet offering to absence. You sip slowly and write one final letter, not on birch bark, not for the sea, but in your mind, for yourself. It goes something like this. You made it through the silence. You learned the shape of grief and taught it how to dance. You took every letter he never answered and turned it into shelter. And now you live with the door unlatched, the fire stoked, the weaving unfinished, because you are not done. You are not waiting. You are not lost. You fold that thought up and place it gently between your ribs, where it will stay. Quirky belief. Some say that the soul moves slowest through the heart. That's why it aches when we lose, and why it sings when we finally stop searching. That night you dream of nothing, and it is the sweetest dream you've ever had. The days grow long. Light spills through your windows before the birds even gather the courage to sing. It lingers late too, brushing your cheekbones as you kneel to tie herbs or rinse the basin or simply sit doing nothing but breathing. You've never needed less and never had more. Your hands no longer tremble when they weave. Your thoughts no longer circle like gulls in search of scraps. The storm that lived in your chest has finally gone quiet, not vanished, not forgotten, but gentled. As if even grief tires eventually. You're not happy every moment. That was never the goal. You're rooted, steady. A woman with a story that no longer chases its tail. Today you bake. Honeyed oatcakes, the kind your mother taught you, the kind you hadn't made since before he left. The scent fills the house and spills into the path where the goats sniff and try to pretend they're invited. You bring a few cakes to the market, share them with the girl and her aunt. They trade you fresh sheep's milk and news of a merchant passing through with beads and stories and fabric from the south. You buy nothing. You don't need trinkets to feel adorned. On your walk home, you pass by the sea once more. You don't stop, you don't look, and it doesn't call. Mainstream historical fact. Not all Viking stories end in war or legend. Most ended quietly on hillsides and kitchens by hearths. The women were often the ones who ensured stories were remembered, not as epic poems but as lived lives. And living well despite loss was its own saga. At home you tend your garden. The nettle is thriving. The yarrow stands tall. And in the corner where the soil was once too hard to take seed, a single flax plant curls toward the sun. You press your fingers into the earth and say softly, "You can grow now." And somehow you know you're speaking to yourself too. Inside, you take one last look at your wall of weavings. So many threads, so many stories. And in the center, the one with the hand open and upward stitched with red, the thread now glows faintly gold in the evening light. You touch it once as if to say thank you. Quirky belief. Some Norse folk whispered that when a woman stitched the truth into cloth, it would speak back to her in dreams. Not with words, but with peace. A hush that settled deep enough to cradle even the loudest ache. That night you sit by the fire. You sip your tea. You light your candle. You don't write a letter. You don't need to. There is no message that hasn't already been said through how you live. You are not waiting for him. You are not haunted by the sea. You are not unfinished. You are here. Living in full sentences, breathing through your own chapters, spinning your own thread, and as the candle burns low and the fire dims to a whisper, you lie down beneath your furs, close your eyes, and let the soft hush of the world finally carry you to sleep. So now, let it all slow down. Let the images soften like mist rolling over the hills. Let the threads we've woven of longing and laughter, of salt and silence, gently unspool in the quiet corners of your mind. You're safe here. The sea no longer needs your letters, and neither does your heart. The woman in the story, she may have begun with grief, but she ends with grace. Not because the pain vanished, but because she learned to live beside it, to sip tea with it, to weave it into something gentle. And you lying there now, breathing slow. You've done the same. You've traveled through storms without a ship, through memories without a map. And still you've arrived here in this soft place where the night wraps around you like a story that no longer needs retelling. So breathe. Feel the weight in your chest turn to warmth. Feel the hush settle into your bones. You're not being watched by the past. You're being held by the present. Let the glow of the candle fade behind your eyelids. Let your thoughts float like driftwood on a still sea. No more waiting, no more writing, only rest. The waves will keep their own watch now, and you are home. End of script. Sweet dreams.